Well, you've made it to Module 4, and in all honesty, give yourself a pat on the back because you have now done the bulk of the work required to build an effective school counseling program framework. You truly have. Here in Module 4, the core idea is to increase the level of support for your school counseling program. Support both from your administration, your principal especially, and if you choose, the level of support from your community. To do this, Module 4 proposes two things: an annual meeting with your administration, especially a short meeting with your school principal, and at least one annual meeting with an advisory council or committee that you create just for your school counseling program. I probably don't have to tell you why these optional steps are important, but I worked for a time as one of our state school counseling specialists, and every year I would get a call from a handful of school counselors whose positions were sadly threatened with cutbacks or elimination. And inevitably, the counselor would ask, is there anything I can do to advocate for my position? Is there any data you can give me? Now, school counselors can and should advocate for their school counseling programs, but often the best advocates are others, like your principal or your community members or parents on your school counseling advisory council. If your position is ever threatened, you will want them on your side. Also, in this day and age of lots of misinformation and social media, several counselors have said to me, thank goodness we have an advisory council with parents who know what we do and why we do it, because it's the parents and community members on those committees and councils that become the best defenders of our counseling program. So in Module 4, we first talk about the importance of an annual meeting with your school principal. The actual meeting will require very little on your part. We recommend trying to schedule at least a 15 to 30-minute meeting between you, any other counselors in your program, and your school leader. Before your meeting, print actual copies of your annual update and your action plan, enough copies for your principal and for yourself and anyone else attending the meeting. When you meet, we suggest a few steps summarized in the sample agenda that you'll find in step A2. It includes 5 parts. First, a brief summary of the purpose of the meeting, which starts with a thank you to your administrator and his or her team for making the time to meet with you. Then follows quickly with an explanation of the main purpose of the meeting, which is primarily to provide a quick update of the school counseling program and to get some feedback from your principal regarding your program's organization, focus, and action plan for the year. Then simply walk through each component of your annual update report, briefly describing your current counseling staff, caseload of students, current student to counselor ratios, how you spent your time last year, where you hope to spend your time this year, which includes a reminder of the services that you provide through your school counseling program. Then quickly get to the point where you share with your principal your annual calendar, which shows that you have proactively scheduled classroom lessons and parent nights and other events over the entire year, and then show the student priority needs that you've identified during your very thorough review of student outcome data. When you get to this section, explain to your principal that you and your team examined the most recent student data you could find to determine the priority needs of your students, and then developed detailed student outcome goals for the top 2 or 3 needs. Briefly explain your SMART goals and how you determine the strategies that you plan to use to measurably impact to move these goals by examining root causes. At this point, you'll want to pause and ask your administrator what his or her thoughts are. What do they think of the priority needs you've identified? Are these aligned with the school's improvement goals? Are there other priority student needs that the principal or school leader thinks should be considered? And are those other needs something the school counseling program can realistically impact? Also ask if there are other root causes or strategies that they would suggest you consider. Now, I know this part of the process can honestly be a bit scary, especially if you're a concrete sequential thinker like I am at times. Who knows what your principal might say, right? That's why you need to be prepared in case your principal says something like, well, I don't want you to focus on these goals, but instead focus on these other goals. If this happens, be patient and discuss the suggested changes. It may just be that your principal needs to feel they've been heard or that they're ultimately fine with the goals you are proposing. But if your principal actually requests that you readjust your student outcome goals or add to them in order to align with what he or she feels should be the priority, try to be as accommodating as you can. Yes, it's a pain, but when you have to adjust your goals or strategies based on your principal's input, you actually create a stronger level of support for your school counseling program. The irony is, simply by asking for your principal's input and then acting on that input, you will create stronger buy-in and support from your school leader. Now, yes, it may be a bit more work for you, but it's a win for the degree of support you will garner for your school counseling program. More than likely, the discussion with your principal will result in a thoughtful, positive conversation about the best ways to improve student attendance or student achievement or behavior, and thereby strengthening the perception, at least, and really the reality that your school counseling program is an extension of the goals and efforts of your administrator's office. If you've been given the green light by your administrator to go forward with your annual goals, great, you're on your way. You can ask your principal to verify his or her approval if you want by signing your document, which is part of a detailed process required if you're going for ramp, but a verbal agreement from your principal is often good enough. If your principal is the kind who really wants to know what you're doing in more detail, feel free to share your action plan document with them that shows not only your student outcome goals, but the associated student standards and the student learning objectives you've identified. Note that the sample agenda in step A2 is in a Google Doc. To make edits or changes to the agenda, and we hope you will, simply click on File, make a copy, then rename it and save it to your own Google folder. In step A3, you can upload that edited document if you wish, so that it stays right here in Core for easy access by you and others in the future. Since this effective school counseling framework can be used every year, we suggest doing the work of modules 1, 2, and 3 early in the fall so that you can have this meeting with your administrator, this annual meeting at the very beginning of the school year, as early as possible. That just sets the stage for greater success. To wrap up this video with an action step, we suggest that you email your principal or contact his or her schedule right now if you can, and get a meeting on the calendar as soon as possible. Then be sure to put a recurring annual reminder on your calendar to make sure this gets done every year.